On the coldest morning of the year, while the warriors of Ironfang Pack prepared for the grand moon oath ceremony, a young maid quietly scrubbed blood from the stone training yard. No one knew her real birthday. No one remembered who had brought her to the pack as a child. To everyone, she was simply Aurelia, the servant who belonged nowhere. Every member of the pack believed she was cursed. Every member, except one pair of unseen eyes watching from the distant mountains. She lit fireplaces before anyone else opened their eyes. She carried heavy buckets from the frozen river, cooked meals she was never allowed to eat, repaired torn uniforms, cleaned muddy boots, and polished silver armor until it reflected the moonlight. The warriors laughed whenever she passed. Some deliberately scattered dirt across freshly cleaned floors, just to force her to start again. Children copied their parents, calling her the ashmaid, because soot constantly stained her hands. Despite everything, Aurelia never answered with anger. She believed kindness cost nothing, even when no one returned it. Only an elderly cook occasionally slipped her an extra piece of warm bread and whispered, "Never let cruel people decide who you are." Those words became the only comfort Aurelia carried. Ironfang Pack was ruled by Alpha Torvak, a leader feared for his strength but admired by few. To him, worth was measured by power alone. Warriors mattered, hunters mattered, healers mattered, servants did not. Whenever Torvak saw Aurelia working, he treated her as though she were invisible. During council meetings, he often declared, "A weak branch should never stand beside the strongest tree." The entire hall understood exactly whom he meant. His daughter, Lady Sylene, enjoyed humiliating Aurelia even more. She ordered impossible tasks, ruined dresses Aurelia had sewn, and blamed every small mistake on the quiet servant. Aurelia endured it all in silence. Once every year, every family gathered beneath the sacred moon pillar. The moon oath ceremony celebrated loyalty, courage, and unity. Warriors received medals. Hunters earned honor. Children were blessed before the entire pack. Servants were expected to remain invisible. Aurelia spent the entire morning decorating the ceremonial hall with white flowers and silver lanterns. For a brief moment, watching everyone smile, she imagined what it might feel like to belong somewhere. It was a dream that lasted only minutes. As the ceremony reached its highest moment, panic spread across the gathering. The sacred moonstone crest, an ancient symbol carried only during the ceremony, had disappeared. The council demanded answers. Before anyone could investigate, Lady Sylene stepped forward. She pointed directly at Aurelia. "She's the last person who touched the ceremonial table." Murmurs filled the crowd. No evidence. No witnesses. Only suspicion. Several guards searched Aurelia's small servant room. Hidden beneath her blanket lay the missing moonstone crest. Aurelia stared in disbelief. She had never seen it before. Someone had planted it there. She tried to explain. No one listened. Before thousands of pack members, Alpha Torvak announced his judgment. A servant who betrays the pack deserves neither mercy nor shelter. Aurelia begged only for a chance to prove her innocence. Torvak refused. Without trial, without evidence, without compassion, he tore away the simple servant crest she had worn since childhood. It was the only symbol proving she belonged to Ironfang. He threw it into the dirt before her feet. Guards opened the massive northern gate. The crowd watched in silence. Some looked away, others smiled. No one defended her. Carrying nothing except an old traveling cloak, Aurelia walked beyond the borders she had spent her entire life serving. The gates slammed shut behind her. For the first time in years, she was completely alone. Snow began falling harder. The forest beyond Ironfang was known as the Silent Peaks, a place travelers avoided after sunset. The cold bit through Aurelia's thin clothing. She stumbled over frozen roots and nearly collapsed several times. As night covered the mountains, she found shelter beneath an ancient stone arch covered in glowing crimson moss. Exhausted, hungry, heartbroken, she whispered one question into the empty darkness. Why was I never enough? The wind carried away her voice, or so she believed. Far above the clouds, a gigantic shadow crossed the full moon. Golden eyes opened within the darkness. Massive crimson wings stretched wider than the mountain cliffs. The creature circled once, twice, then descended silently toward the lonely girl sleeping beneath the ancient stone arch. Just before dawn, the enormous dragon landed only a few steps away. Instead of roaring, instead of attacking, the legendary beast slowly lowered its head and knelt before the rejected maid. The enormous crimson dragon remained perfectly still, its golden eyes fixed on the frightened young maid. Aurelia could barely breathe. Every story she had ever heard claimed dragons were monsters that burned kingdoms to ash. Yet this one did something no one could have imagined. It lowered its head even further, in a gesture of respect. Then a deep, calm voice echoed through the mountain valley. At last, I have found you. Golden fire swirled around the dragon's body. Its enormous form dissolved into countless glowing embers. Standing where the dragon had been was a tall young man wearing dark crimson armor etched with ancient silver runes. His long black hair moved gently in the mountain wind, and his amber eyes still carried the warmth of dragon fire. He introduced himself simply. I am Varian. He did not mention titles. He did not boast of power. Instead, he bowed once more. Aurelia stepped back in confusion. Why would someone like you bow to someone like me? Varian answered quietly. Because you have carried a forgotten destiny longer than you realize. Before Aurelia could ask another question, a strange warmth spread through her left wrist. The small birthmark she had hidden beneath her sleeves since childhood began glowing with soft crimson light. She quickly covered it. No one in Ironfang had ever seen it. As a little girl, an elderly woman had warned her, never let anyone see this mark. Some will fear it. Others will hunt you for it. Varian looked at the glowing symbol with unmistakable relief. The Ember Sigil, it truly exists. Aurelia stared in disbelief. You know what this is? Varian nodded. More than you can imagine. High among the snowy cliffs, 3 Ironfang scouts secretly watched the encounter. They recognized Aurelia immediately. One whispered, "That's the servant, Alpha Torvak, exiled yesterday." Another stared at the Dragon Prince. If the Alpha learns dragons still live, he'll send the entire pack. The eldest scout quietly ordered, "Do not attack, follow them." Hidden beneath white cloaks, they disappeared into the forest. Neither Aurelia nor Varian noticed. Varian offered Aurelia food from a small traveling pack. Warm bread, fresh fruit, clear spring water. She hesitated. No one had ever offered her a meal before eating themselves. Varian noticed her uncertainty. Without speaking, he took the first bite himself. Only then did Aurelia accept. As they walked through the mountains, Varion never treated her like a servant. He carried heavy supplies himself. He slowed his pace whenever she grew tired. When she stumbled crossing icy rocks, he simply offered his hand without embarrassment or pity. For the first time in years, someone treated her as an equal. Days later, they reached a hidden valley untouched by winter. Crystal rivers flowed beneath flowering trees. Warm steam rose from glowing hot springs. Ancient dragon statues stood carved into towering cliffs. Aurelia stopped walking. This place can't be real. Varian smiled faintly. Most believe dragons vanished centuries ago. He looked across the peaceful valley. We simply learned how to disappear. Aurelia realized every story she had been told about dragons had been a lie. As they crossed an old stone bridge, arrows suddenly flew from the trees. The hidden Ironfang scouts had finally made their move. Varion reacted instantly. A wall of crimson fire erupted before Aurelia, melting every arrow before it reached her. The attackers froze. They had expected a dragon. They had not expected dragon fire to obey a single command without harming the forest around it. Varion did not chase them. Instead, he watched them retreat. This changes everything. Beyond the valley stood enormous black gates, carved directly into the mountainside. Each gate towered higher than castle walls. Ancient dragon symbols glowed as Varion approached. The ground trembled. Slowly, the sealed gates began opening for the first time in centuries. Thousands of lights appeared beyond them. An entire hidden civilization waited inside. Dragons soared peacefully above crystal towers. People in crimson robes stopped whatever they were doing and turned toward the entrance. Not because they had seen their prince, because they had seen Aurelia. An elderly woman wearing robes woven with golden scales stepped forward from the crowd. She looked at Aurelia's glowing ember sigil. Her hands began to tremble. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered words no one had spoken for generations. The keeper of the first flame has finally returned. Aurelia stood frozen. Keeper of what? The old woman's expression grew solemn. Of the power that could either unite every kingdom or reduce them all to ashes. As the ancient gates of the hidden dragon kingdom closed behind her, Aurelia felt as though she had stepped into another world. Towering crystal spires glowed with rivers of molten light flowing beneath transparent stone bridges. Dragons of every size soared peacefully through the skies, while children laughed beside creatures that legends had once called monsters. For the first time in her life, no one looked at Aurelia with disgust. Instead, they looked at her with wonder. Prince Varion personally guided Aurelia through the dragon's citadel. Unlike Ironfang Pack, no one bowed because of fear. Citizens greeted one another with respect, whether they were blacksmiths, scholars, healers, or soldiers. Aurelia noticed something strange. Even the royal guards thanked servants for their work. She quietly asked, "Why does everyone treat each other so differently here?" Varian smiled. "Because a kingdom built only on strength eventually destroys itself." His answer stayed with her. For the first time, Aurelia imagined what life could have been if kindness had been stronger than pride. Varian led Aurelia into an enormous underground chamber carved deep beneath Fire Mountain. The walls shimmered with ancient crystals that held glowing memories from centuries past. Waiting there was Elder Morwen, the oldest historian of the Dragon Kingdom. Without saying a word, The elderly woman gently placed her hand over Aurelia's glowing ember sigil. The chamber suddenly filled with crimson light. Images appeared in the air. Ancient dragons, wolf clans, a majestic queen surrounded by both species. Standing beside her was a dragon king wearing the same royal crest as Varion. Aurelia watched in stunned silence. "Who are they?" Morwen answered softly. "Your ancestors." Morwen revealed a history erased from every book outside the Dragon Kingdom. Long ago, dragons and wolves had not been enemies. Together, they protected the realm under an alliance known as the Covenant of Flame and Moon. The alliance lasted for generations until greed divided the kingdoms. A powerful warlord coveted the dragon's flame heart, a sacred source of life beneath Fire Mountain. Unable to conquer both races together, he spread lies and suspicion between them. Old friends became bitter enemies. The covenant collapsed. To prevent the flame heart from falling into the wrong hands, the Dragon Kingdom vanished from the world, hiding behind ancient magic. Before disappearing, the last Flame Queen entrusted a fragment of her power to a single bloodline. That bloodline led to Aurelia. Aurelia expected to be trained as a warrior. Instead, Elder Morwen refused to hand her a weapon. "The first flame was never meant to destroy," she explained. "It exists to protect life." Her lessons focused on patience, discipline, and control. Aurelia learned to sense the warmth flowing through the ember sigil. Tiny sparks danced across her fingertips. When she became frustrated, the flames disappeared. When her heart was calm, the fire responded gently. Varian often watched the lessons from a distance. He never interfered. He simply encouraged her whenever she doubted herself. Slowly, Aurelia began believing she was capable of more than surviving. One afternoon, Aurelia wandered into the dragon hatchery. Instead of fearsome beasts, she found curious young dragons no larger than hunting dogs. One playful hatchling stole her scarf and raced through the gardens. Laughing, Aurelia chased after it. The hatchlings surrounded her, nudging her hands and shoulders with affection. The keepers watched in amazement. They've never trusted a stranger so quickly. Even Varian looked genuinely surprised. Ancient legends claimed dragons could sense a person's true heart long before people could. The hatchlings had made their choice. Far from the Dragon Kingdom, Alpha Torvak received alarming news from the surviving scouts. The dragons were real. Their hidden kingdom existed, and the servant he had cast out now walked beside their prince. Torvak refused to believe Aurelia possessed any importance. Instead, he saw only opportunity. "If dragons guard treasures beneath that mountain," he declared, "then Iron Fang will claim them." Lady Sylene eagerly supported the idea. She secretly feared one thing more than dragons, that Aurelia might return stronger than anyone expected. Together, they began preparing an invasion. Deep beneath Fire Mountain, Varian escorted Aurelia into a forbidden sanctuary. At its center floated a magnificent crown forged from crystal and living fire. It hovered above a pool of molten light without burning. The air itself hummed with ancient power. As Aurelia stepped closer, the ember sigil on her wrist blazed brighter than ever before. The crown slowly rotated toward her. Ancient runes awakened one after another. No one touched it, yet it responded. The chamber trembled. A voice echoed through the sanctuary, not from any person, but from the eternal flame itself. "The heir of the covenant has returned." The crystal crown rose into the air. Its brilliant light filled the chamber. Then, before the astonished eyes of Varian and Elder Morwen, it began drifting slowly toward Aurelia. The eternal flame crown floated through the sacred chamber. Every dragon present held their breath. Instead of settling upon Aurelia's head, it stopped just inches above her. A warm circle of crimson light spread across the floor. Then, as gently as a falling feather, the crown dissolved into countless glowing embers that flowed into the ember sigil on Aurelia's wrist. The chamber fell silent. Elder Morwen whispered, "The crown has not accepted a ruler, it has chosen a guardian." At that exact moment, a warning bell echoed across the Dragon Kingdom. Enemies had entered the Fire Mountains. Far below the mountain, Alpha Torvak led hundreds of Iron Fang warriors through the narrow volcanic passes. They carried enchanted chains, heavy crossbows, and weapons coated with rare frost crystals said to weaken dragons. Torvak wasn't marching to rescue Aurelia. He wasn't even seeking justice. He wanted the legendary Flameheart beneath the mountain, a power he believed would make Ironfang the strongest pack in history. Lady Sylene rode beside him, smiling with quiet satisfaction. "When this is over," she whispered, "Aurelia will disappear forever." Neither of them realized they were walking into a kingdom far older and wiser than their own. Inside the Dragon Citadel, the Royal Council gathered. Many generals demanded immediate retaliation. General Raiden slammed his fist against the stone table. "Let us meet them before they reach our gates." Others argued that exposing the Dragon Kingdom would risk another age of war. Prince Varian listened carefully before speaking. "We will defend our people, but we will not become the aggressors." Some respected his restraint. Others believed mercy would be seen as weakness. Aurelia remained silent, remembering how quickly fear had turned her own home against her. As Ironfang forces approached the outer valley, Lady Sylene secretly separated from the main army with a handful of loyal warriors. Her true mission had nothing to do with dragons. She wanted Aurelia dead before anyone could discover the truth about the Ember Sigil. Using hidden mountain paths once used by smugglers, Sylene slipped past the outer patrols. By nightfall, she reached the peaceful dragon gardens. There she saw Aurelia laughing as young dragon hatchlings chased one another. The sight filled her with rage. "She doesn't deserve this life," Sylene hissed. She quietly drew a poisoned dagger. Before Sylene could strike, Aurelia sensed movement behind her. The dagger flashed through the air. Varian reacted instantly, stepping between them. The blade scraped harmlessly across his dragon-forged armor. Royal guards surrounded Sylene within seconds. General Raiden demanded her execution for attempting to murder the future guardian of the eternal flame. Everyone expected Aurelia to agree. Instead, she stepped forward. No. The entire courtyard fell silent. Hatred already destroyed enough lives. I won't let it decide another. Even Sylene stared in disbelief. Varian looked at Aurelia with quiet admiration. Strength, he realized, was not measured by the ability to destroy an enemy. It was measured by the courage to stop hatred from spreading. The following morning, Prince Varian walked onto the highest balcony overlooking the valley. Below stood the entire Dragon Legion. Across the battlefield waited Alpha Torvak's army. Varian's voice echoed through the mountains. "Hear my words, Alpha Torvak. Aurelia of the Ember Sigil stands under the protection of the Dragon Crown. Any hand raised against her shall answer to me. Torvak laughed loudly enough for both armies to hear. "You protect a servant? Then you've already lost." Varian answered with calm certainty. "No, you lost the day you failed to see her worth." The words spread through both armies like wildfire. Torvak ignored every warning. He ordered the attack. The valley erupted into chaos. Wolves charged across the stone bridges. Dragons filled the sky with thunderous wingbeats. Arrows darkened the air. Explosions echoed against the mountains. In the middle of the battlefield, frightened villagers and wounded soldiers from both sides became trapped between collapsing cliffs. Without hesitation, Aurelia ran toward them. The ember sigil blazed brighter than ever before. Instead of unleashing destructive fire, she raised both hands. A magnificent wall of living crimson flame rose around the civilians, blocking falling rocks and burning arrows without harming anyone inside. The fire shimmered like liquid light. Wolves, dragons, children, soldiers. Everyone inside the barrier remained completely unharmed. Both armies stopped fighting. No one had ever witnessed fire that protected instead of destroyed. As silence settled over the battlefield, the sky suddenly darkened. High above Fire Mountain, ancient dragon runes ignited one after another. The mountains trembled. A deep voice echoed across the valley. "The Guardian has awakened." Far beneath the mountain, something ancient answered the call. A pair of enormous golden eyes slowly opened within the heart of the earth. The true protector of the eternal flame had awakened. The mountains continued to tremble. Deep beneath Fire Mountain, a colossal stone door, sealed for 1,000 years, slowly opened. A wave of ancient warmth swept across the valley. Every dragon immediately lowered its head. Even the fiercest warriors stood frozen. Elder Morwen looked toward the glowing mountain and whispered, "The heart of the Covenant has awakened, and it is calling only one person." Every eye turned toward Aurelia. Rather than celebrating Aurelia's awakening, Elder Morwen led her into the hidden chamber of embers. There, Aurelia expected to receive a throne. Instead, she found only silence. Morwen explained, "Power has never crowned a true ruler, character does." To become guardian of the Covenant, Aurelia had to complete 3 ancient trials. Not trials of strength, but of wisdom. The first trial tested compassion. The second tested honesty. The third would test whether she could place the lives of strangers above her own. If she failed, the eternal flame would reject her forever. News of Aurelia's awakening spread throughout the Dragon Kingdom. Not everyone welcomed it. Several ancient dragon houses questioned how a former servant from a wolf pack could carry the Covenant's legacy. General Rhydon spoke for many. "She has courage," he admitted, "but courage alone cannot unite kingdoms." Some nobles demanded that Varian marry into one of the great dragon families instead. Others feared Aurelia would weaken centuries of tradition. Varian refused to join the arguments. He simply said, "Judge her by her choices, not by where she began." The kingdom remained divided. Before the trials could begin, disaster struck. A powerful earthquake shook the lower districts of the Dragon Citadel. Stone bridges collapsed. Homes caught fire. Families became trapped beneath falling ruins. While nobles argued about succession, Aurelia acted. She organized healers, blacksmiths, soldiers, and ordinary citizens into rescue teams. Using the ember sigil, she guided protective flames through collapsed tunnels. creating safe paths without burning the stone. She carried frightened children to safety. She comforted the elderly before treating her own injuries. No speeches, no royal orders, just quiet determination. Watching from above, General Rydon realized something unexpected. The people had already begun following her. That evening, Varion found Aurelia sitting alone beside a quiet lake reflecting the stars. She admitted she feared disappointing everyone. "I'm not a queen," she said softly. "I still feel like the girl who cleaned empty halls." Varian smiled. "A crown never creates a ruler. It only reveals the one who has been leading all along." For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Varion reached into his pocket and revealed a small silver pendant, shaped like intertwined dragon wings and a crescent moon. It had belonged to his mother, the last crown princess. "One day," he said quietly, "I hope you'll choose to stand beside me, not because of destiny, but because you want to." Aurelia accepted the pendant, her eyes filled with quiet emotion. Humiliated by his failed invasion, Alpha Torvak refused to retreat. Consumed by pride, he sought allies among rogue warlords who had long coveted the Dragon Kingdom. Together, they forged an uneasy alliance. Their plan was simple: destroy the Dragon Citadel, capture Aurelia, claim the Flame Heart before the Covenant could be restored. Lady Sylene secretly warned her father that Aurelia had become far stronger than expected. Torvak ignored her. "She was born a servant," he declared. Servants never change history. His greatest mistake was believing the past defined the future. The final trial began unexpectedly. A magical vision placed Aurelia inside an illusion where Fire Mountain erupted. She could save only one, either Prince Varian or hundreds of ordinary citizens trapped below. Without hesitation, she chose the people. The illusion shattered instantly. The eternal flame surrounded her in brilliant crimson light. A voice echoed through the chamber. "A guardian who seeks the throne is unworthy. A guardian who chooses others before herself has already earned it." The ember sigil transformed. Its crimson glow blended with silver moonlight, creating a symbol unseen for centuries. The Covenant had been fully restored. Across the battlefield, thousands of enemy soldiers marched toward Fire Mountain. War banners darkened the horizon. Ancient siege engines rolled into position. Above them, storm clouds gathered unnaturally fast. Then, a deafening dragon's roar echoed across the sky. One dragon appeared, then 10, then hundreds. For the first time in 1,000 years, the entire Dragon Legion took flight together. Varion drew his sword and looked at Aurelia. "Tomorrow," he said, "2 worlds will decide whether they stand together or fall forever." Dawn never reached Fire Mountain. Dark storm clouds covered the sky as thousands of warriors gathered below the Dragon Citadel. On one side stood the united Dragon Legion, their wings stretching across the heavens like living crimson banners. On the other stood Alpha Torvak's coalition, determined to claim the Flame Heart at any cost. Between the two armies stood only 2 figures, Prince Varion and Aurelia. The fate of 2 worlds would be decided before the next sunrise. With a single command from Torvak, the coalition surged forward. Siege engines launched enchanted stone projectiles toward the Dragon Citadel. The Dragon Legion rose into the sky, intercepting the attacks before they could strike the city. The valley erupted into chaos. Dragons dove through the clouds. Warriors clashed across the mountain passes. The sound of steel echoed against the cliffs. Yet in the middle of the battlefield, Aurelia refused to lead with destruction. Using the power of the restored covenant, she created radiant barriers that shielded healers, rescued trapped civilians, and prevented entire sections of the mountain from collapsing. Her power protected life first, and fought only when there was no other choice. As the battle intensified, Elder Morwen arrived, carrying a weathered crystal archive recovered from the deepest vault beneath Fire Mountain. Before both armies, she activated the ancient memory crystal. A vision filled the sky. Everyone witnessed the forgotten history. They saw the original covenant between dragons and wolves. They saw the first Flame Queen standing beside the first Moon Guardian. Then came the betrayal. Centuries earlier, it had not been dragons who broke the peace. A greedy warlord had forged false evidence, turning both kingdoms against one another to seize power. The hatred that shaped generations had begun with a single lie. Silence spread across the battlefield. Many wolf warriors lowered their weapons. For the first time, they questioned everything they had been taught. Even after the truth was revealed, Alpha Torvak refused to surrender. "Power belongs to those strong enough to take it," he shouted. He charged toward the sanctuary where the flame heart rested. Vaerian intercepted him. The two leaders fought fiercely across the ancient stone bridge above the molten caverns. Meanwhile, Aurelia raced toward the collapsing sanctuary to protect the flame heart before the battle destroyed it. Torvak's obsession blinded him. As the bridge began to crumble beneath his feet, Vaerian reached out to pull him to safety. Torvak rejected the offered hand. Consumed by his own pride, he lost his footing and disappeared into the collapsing chasm below. His downfall came not through revenge, but through the choices he made. Watching her father's fall, Lady Sylene stood frozen. For years, jealousy had ruled every decision she made. She had blamed Aurelia for everything she lacked. Now, standing amid the ruins of war, she realized her hatred had brought only loss. When the sanctuary ceiling began collapsing, Sylene made a different choice. She helped trapped children and wounded soldiers escape before seeking safety herself. After the battle, she surrendered peacefully and accepted responsibility for her actions. Justice would be decided through the laws of the United Kingdoms, not through vengeance. Deep within Fire Mountain, the ancient flame heart became unstable after centuries of isolation. If it shattered, both kingdoms would be destroyed. Elder Morwen explained that only someone carrying both compassion and courage could restore the covenant completely. Aurelia stepped forward. She placed one hand over the glowing flame heart. Vaerian placed his hand beside hers. The ember sigil and the dragon prince's royal crest began glowing together. Silver moonlight and crimson fire merged into a brilliant golden light that spread throughout the mountain. The violent tremors stopped. The flame heart stabilized. For the first time in centuries, the covenant was whole again. Weeks later, Fire Mountain looked completely different. Dragon craftsmen and wolf builders rebuilt villages side by side. Trade routes reopened. Children from both kingdoms trained together without fear. Old borders became peaceful roads instead of battlefields. General Raiden formally pledged the Dragon Legion to defend both kingdoms. Even many former Ironfang warriors chose to help rebuild what hatred had destroyed. The age of isolation had finally ended. At sunrise, the people of both kingdoms gathered before the restored Hall of the Covenant. Instead of placing a royal crown upon Aurelia's head, Elder Morwen presented her with a simple silver and crimson mantle, the traditional symbol of a guardian. "A ruler may command," Morwen said, "but a guardian serves." Aurelia accepted it with quiet humility. Prince Varion stepped beside her and gently took her hand. "Will you build this future with me?" he asked. Smiling through tears, Aurelia answered, "Yes." As dragons soared across the golden morning sky and wolves howled from the distant hills, the people cheered, not because a servant had become a queen, but because a young woman who had once been rejected had chosen compassion over bitterness, unity over revenge, and hope over fear. And from that day forward, the story of Aurelia and Prince Varion was remembered not as the tale of a maid and a dragon, but as the